During the reign of Emperor Menelik II, the eastern part of Ethiopia was governed by his cousin Ras Mekonnen. Ras Mekonnen was a close confidant of the emperor and played a significant role in Ethiopian history and politics. He was often at the forefront of major political decisions and reforms. His leadership style was profoundly influenced by his early experiences and education, highlighting his ability to blend traditional Ethiopian governance methods with modern reforms. One of Ras Mekonnen's most notable achievements was his leadership role in the Battle of Adwa in 1896. He commanded one of the main Ethiopian battalions that decisively defeated Italian forces and contributed to the sovereignty of Ethiopia. Ras Mekonnen was married to Waziri Yesha Emibet Ali, the daughter of a nobleman from northeastern Ethiopia. Ras Mekonnen and Yesha Emibet welcomed their son on July 23, 1892 in the town of Ijasa Goro in Haraj province and named him Tafari. Yesha Emibet, who had 8 miscarriages before giving birth to Tafari, died from delivery complications when he was 19 months old. Having been to Europe twice, Ras Mekonnen had seen European civilization and he was convinced of the value of education. Therefore, he strongly desired that his son Tafari should learn foreign languages. When a medical doctor from Guadeloupe, which is an overseas department of France, came to his city Hara, he arranged that he should teach Tafari French an hour or so a day when he could be spared from curing the sick. This gave young Tafari the first opportunity to learn French. When Tafari was 13 years old, his father gave him the rank of Dujazmach and made him governor of one of the large regions in Harag province called Garam al-Later. The literal meaning of Dujazmach is keeper of the door, often translated as governor-general. Although Tafari was made Dujazmach, his age did not yet permit him to sit in judgment in court or to administer the region or to muster the army in battle order. Therefore, his father appointed a tutor and deputy that will serve as a chief administrator for all the work while Tafari retains only the title. In 1911 Tafari married Menin Asfor, who was the granddaughter of Mikhail Ali, the king of Wollo province. Menin Asfor was 22 years old while Tafari was 19 years of age. Menin had been married twice before Tafari. She divorced her first husband while her second husband died suddenly. The marriages have produced 4 children. Tafari also had a daughter from a previous marriage. The marriage between Menin Asfor and Tafari lasted for 50 years. Although possibly a political match designed to create peace between Ethiopian nobles, the couple's family had said they married with mutual consent. Tafari described his spouse as a woman without any malice whatsoever. In 1916 Princess Zuditu Menelik, the daughter of Emperor Menelik II, was named as Empress of Ethiopia, and Dujazmach Tafari Mekonnen was elevated to the title of Ras and made heir to the throne and the regency plenipotentiary. During the period 1916 to 1930, although Zuditu was the empress, Ras Tafari dominated the politics. In 1930, when Queen Zuditu died, Ras Tafari was proclaimed emperor and assumed the throne. The coronation ceremony of Ras Tafari was attended by envoys of England, Belgium, Sweden, the Netherlands, Japan, Egypt, France, USA, Germany, Greece, Turkey and Poland. Upon his ascension, he took as his regnal name Haile Selassie I. Haile means in the Giz language power of, and Selassie means Trinity, therefore Haile Selassie roughly translates to power of the Trinity. Haile Selassie's full title was the Conquering Lion of the Tribe of Judah, His Imperial Majesty Haile Selassie I, King of Kings of Ethiopia, Lord of Lords, Elect of God. This title reflects Ethiopian dynastic traditions, which hold that all monarchs must trace their lineage to Menelik I, who is described by the Kabra Nagist as the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. The Kabra Nagist is a 14th-century national epic that is considered a crucial part of the literature and culture of Ethiopia. It details the history of Ethiopian monarchs who descend from King Solomon. The coronation of Emperor Haile Selassie was one of the most pivotal events in the history of modern Ethiopia. It heralded the political demise of the hereditary nobility that had hitherto limited the power of the monarchy. Haile Selassie's rule was characterized by efforts to modernize the country and consolidate power, including the establishment of a new constitution in 1931 and the implementation of reforms aimed at centralizing authority and diminishing the influence of the traditional nobility. Many changes were made during the reign of Haile Selassie toward the modernization of Ethiopia, both during his time as Ras Tafari regent of Emperor Seditu and after his coronation as Emperor 1930. One of Haile Selassie's key initiatives was infrastructure development. He invested heavily in the construction of roads and the building of bridges and railways to connect different parts of the country and facilitate trade and communication. These infrastructure projects not only improved transportation within Ethiopia but also helped to integrate the country into the global economy. In addition to infrastructure development, Haile Selassie also focused on education. Through education, he increased the number of competent and literate individuals in government and the military. Haile Selassie started the expansion of education in Ethiopia by establishing his first school, Tefri Mekonnen Primary School, in Addis Ababa in 1925. Between 1930 and 1935, 7 government schools were opened in the main city and 8 in the provincial towns. Modern higher education was commenced during his reign with the establishment of the University College of Addis Ababa, now called Addis Ababa University, in 1950. Students were also sent abroad for Western education to Europe and the United States of America. Ethiopia, which Italy had unsuccessfully tried to conquer in 1896, was in 1934 an independent state when other African countries were colonized by Europeans. The Italo-Ethiopian War of 1896 ended in disaster for the would-be colonizer. At the Battle of Adowa, Italian troops were ambushed by the army of then Ethiopian monarch Menelik II, resulting in the loss of more than 3,000 Italian soldiers, the single biggest loss of European lives during the scramble for Africa. The loss was so embarrassing for Italians that the Francesco Crispi government collapsed when the news was received. The pain of Adowa stuck with some Italians, especially as other European states conquered all of Africa except for Ethiopia. Italian armed forces invaded Ethiopia on October 3, 1935, when Haile Selassie was in power and defeated the Ethiopian army. This forced the emperor into exile, first in Jerusalem and eventually in Great Britain. He bought Fairfield House and moved in his children, as well as servants, government ministers, and Ethiopian priests. It was a big entourage that lived in Bath, so they were very noticeable. Italy went to war with Ethiopia to assert itself as a major colonial European power and acquire more territory next to its other colonial holdings in East Africa. It also was looking for revenge for the earlier failed invasion of Ethiopia in 1896 at Adwa and was a way to rally Italian support for Benito Mussolini's hyper-nationalist government. The Italians set up an occupation of Ethiopia for the next 5 years and committed countless atrocities on the independent African state. Poisonous gas, aerial bombardment, flamethrowers, and concentration camps were all employed. Emperor Selassie addressed the League of Nations, the precursor of the United Nations, and gave a very passionate speech saying essentially that if it's us today, it will be you tomorrow. When Italy declared war on England in 1940, the British flew the emperor to Sudan, helped him build an army, and within a period of 7 months, the Italians were defeated and the emperor was back in his country and his position as leader restored. After returning to the throne following Italy's defeat in 941, Haile Selassie externally contributed for African decolonization in the Cold War, which made him internationally popular. Haile Selassie had played unparalleled leadership role in the establishment of what was then the Organization of African Unity, OAU, in May 1963, now renamed as the African Union. In addition, Addis Ababa was chosen as the seat for the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, UNECA, headquarters in 1958, and of the Organization of African Unity, OA, in 1963. Haile Selassie was elected as the first president of the OAU. On February 10, 2019, the African Union, AU, unveiled a new statue dedicated to Haile Selassie within the walled grounds surrounding its headquarters in the Ethiopian capital, Addis Ababa, the capital city of Ethiopia. There was a failed coup attempt in 1960 that was led by commander of the Imperial Bodyguard, Brigadier General Mengistu Niue. On December 13, 1960, when Haile Selassie was away on a state visit to Brazil, General Mengistu took control of the imperial palace in Addis Ababa. He there detained the emperor's eldest son, Crown Prince Asfawasan, and leading politicians, including the ministers of commerce, defense, and the interior. He was aided by his younger brother Gamami Nui, a US-educated radical who was mainly responsible for the planning and political motivation behind the coup. The two brothers were joined by the chief of security, the police commissioner, and a few educated radicals and were supported by most of the imperial bodyguard. However, the coup was aborted by the emperor's loyalists. The issue which sparked the coup include dissatisfaction of some middle-level government officials with Haile Selassie's autocratic rule and the thwarted aspirations of the growing number of young modernists and Western-educated intellectuals for more rapid social and economic advance. The dissatisfaction of the imperial bodyguard officers with their low pay and what they felt to be their declining status in the military hierarchy were also contributing factors. According to the historian Richard Greenfield, there have been coups, revolutions, and political assassinations throughout Ethiopia's long history, but the abortive revolution of 1960 was different in one vital respect. Its leaders sought not merely to displace the then national leaders, but to reform and remold the whole system of government. Since the 1960 coup attempt, there had been deep concerns among the students and emerging educated classes about social injustice, class contradictions, inequality, and poverty in Ethiopia. In 1964, students at Haile Selassie University, now Addis Ababa University, set up a semi-legal group adopting Marxist-Leninist ideological stances. The same year, students first came out on the streets with the slogan "Land to the Tiller," thus declaring their commitment to revolutionary social change. Exposed to the new left in the universities of Europe and North America, a generation of Ethiopian young people looked to the struggles of Cuba, the guerrilla campaigns of Che Guevara, to Mao and peasant China, to the Black Panther Party, and especially to Ho Chi Minh and the Vietnamese people for guidance and inspiration. Finding itself within what might broadly be termed the anti-revisionist milieu, the Ethiopian student movement studied Marx, Lenin, and Mao. Ethiopian student federations in Europe and North America were in intense interaction with the student movement in Ethiopia. There were mass strikes and demonstrations of workers and teachers' unions, and Ethiopian Muslims made demonstration asking for equal religious rights. The regime followed a policy of repression to protests and demands of the emerging young opposition, but the movement kept up momentum despite the arrests and loss of leaders, and they set the agenda for regime change and social revolution. When army units and urban workers and others with grievances joined in the protests and demands, the fate of the empire was sealed. Eventually, the military seized control of the revolutionary process, deposed the emperor, and began to build what it termed Ethiopian socialism. The military arrested and imprisoned the monarch who had ruled for decades. Haile Selassie died on August 27, 1975, while he was under arrest. At the time of his death, official sources attributed it to natural causes, but evidence later emerged suggesting that he had been strangled on the orders of the military government that had deposed him the previous year and then kept him under house arrest. For 17 years Haile Selassie's corpse lay buried vertically, sealed secretly in concrete beneath a latrine in the grounds of the palace. His body was exhumed in 1992, a year after the Marxist regime was overthrown in a rebellion. The body was placed in a mausoleum in Addis Ababa for another 8 years. In 2000 his body was laid to rest at Holy Trinity Cathedral, built by Haile Selassie himself, where his remains were interred with those of his wife, Empress Meninas IV. Haile Selassie was observed to be unusually fond of animals, lions in particular. According to a memoir by Hans Lockert, a German who acted as head of research at the National Library in Addis Ababa, the emperor found it easier to relax with lions than with human beings. In one of the royal palaces there was a zoo where he kept a pride of tame lions, the black-maned Abyssinian variety, feeding them, it was said, each morning by hand. On churches and public buildings throughout the empire representations of lions figured prominently, as they still do. In the decades following his death, the name of Haile Selassie was gaining wider currency outside the country. In the political imagination of African Americans he was accorded a greater and more enduring significance. During the ferment of spiritual and political debate in the United States and the Caribbean from the 1930s onwards, Haile Selassie's position as monarch of a country uncolonized by Europeans, combined with his claim to be descended in an ancient line from the biblical kings of Israel, gave his name unique mythic force. Among those to recognize this was the Jamaican-born founder of the Back to Africa movement, Marcus Garvey, whose Universal Negro Improvement Association boasted, at its peak, a membership of hundreds of thousands. The Rastafarian connection to Selassie is connected to Marcus Garvey's famous prophecy, "Look to Africa, when a black king shall be crowned, for the day of deliverance is near." This reference to Africa was interpreted to mean Ethiopia, and the link to Sir Black King was the coronation of Haile Selassie in 1930. In Garvey's account of Haile Selassie's coronation, he wrote, "It is for us of the Negro race to assist in every way to hold up the hand of Emperor Ras Tafari." Rastafarianism took shape in the ghettos of Kingston, Jamaica, with Garvey as its prophet and Haile Selassie as its redeemer. Many Rastas believed that Haile Selassie was the Messiah and second coming of Christ who returned to redeem all black people. The movement took its name from the emperor's pre-coronation name, Ras Tafari. When the emperor made a state visit to Jamaica in 1966, he was astonished to be greeted at the airport by a huge crowd of dreadlocked, ganja-smoking devotees who, he learned, considered him the embodiment both of Africanity and divinity. Rastafarianism shaped Bob Marley's worldview and inspired his messages of unity, peace, and resistance against oppression. Songs like War, which quotes a speech by Haile Selassie, highlight Marley's admiration for the Ethiopian leader and his vision for global peace and equality.